Okay, all right.
Awesome.
Gonna start. Hello, my name is Jantare, and I want to welcome you to Reinvent Your Body series, how to create your best health, stop yo-yo dieting, and lose weight for good. Today's my guest is Jessica Pantermuehl. Hello, Jessica.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Welcome to the show. Would you mind introducing yourself a little bit?
Yes, not at all. My name is Jessica Pantermuehl. I am a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and I'm also a board certified holistic health coach. I live here in Los Angeles, where I've been working with clients since 2011, both in private practice as well as as the head of nutrition counseling for an integrative medical practice here in LA. And currently, I focus on supporting women in achieving their ideal weight, clearing their skin, and getting abundant energy through nourishing their bodies rather than depriving it. So getting off of that yo-yo dieting and really feeding and supporting the body with nutrient-dense foods so that it can come back into balance.
Wonderful. So tell us, how do you approach weight loss?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, whenever I see really any sort of non-optimum body condition, so whether that is excess weight, whether it's skin conditions, low energy, anything like this, I see it really as an imbalance of the body's foundations. So let me explain what I mean by that. So you can think of health as falling into two worlds. You have your foundations and you have your consequences. So when I say foundations, that means digestion, blood sugar balance, the kinds of fats that are in our body, the minerals in our body, hydration, right? So like how much water we're drinking. And at the base of that, a nutrient-dense whole food diet. So these are our nutritional foundations. And then we also have our lifestyle foundations, things like sleep, stress levels, and movement. So when our foundations are in really good order, we have great health, right? Where we have really strong, robust, abundant health. However, when one or more of these foundations become imbalanced or get out of balance, then it can show up in this other world as a consequence. So when I say consequences, again, that means like excess weight, that could be skin, that could be digestive issues, that could be constipation, diarrhea, cardiovascular issues, the things that we generally go to the doctor for, right? These are in the world of foundations. And when I see excess weight, in the world of consequences. And when I see excess weight showing up as a consequence, what I look to is blood sugar balance. And that's the foundation that I look to first and look to support with my clients, because that's often the biggest culprit with excess weight. And just to clear that term there, in case somebody isn't familiar with what blood sugar means, when we say blood sugar, we literally mean sugar in the blood. So when you eat something, let's say like an apple, it breaks down into glucose, which is the usable form of energy that your body can use, like a usable form of sugar that your body can then use for energy and for fuel, right? So when we're spiking our blood sugar levels with things like, let's say, donuts or cookies or cakes or something like that, we spike those blood sugar levels really quickly. And what happens is we set ourselves up for weight gain because of a hormone called insulin. So I know we're kind of using some different terms here. So I want to explain what insulin means, again, in case somebody is not totally familiar with that.
Yes, yeah, go.
Yeah, awesome. So you can think of insulin like a big truck that comes out when our blood sugar goes up. So the blood sugar goes up in the body and our body releases this hormone called insulin. And you can think of it like a big truck driving around the bloodstream, and it sees sugar and it puts it in the bed of the truck, and then it drives up to a cell wall. It knocks on that cell wall door. The cell opens up, and that insulin truck, it shuttles sugar into the cell. And that's so that where our body can actually use it. That's we, in the bloodstream, our body can't necessarily use it. It's once it's inside the cell is we're able to use it for that fuel and for energy. So the kind of key takeaway here is that insulin is a storage hormone, right? So it tells our body to store sugar and to store fat. So this is kind of why it comes back to when I see that excess weight showing up as a consequence, I look at, okay, what's happening with blood sugar here? Is this client spiking their blood sugar levels? Oftentimes we need to bring that insulin down into a better, more stable range. So here's kind of how this works in a typical day for someone. I'm going to explain how this might look for somebody who's spiking and crashing those insulin levels. Mm-hmm. So you can think of your blood sugar kind of like a graph, right? And like, let's say this middle range is sort of like a sweet spot where we want to keep our blood sugar nice and smooth and even and sort of rolling right in this range. And so let's say, and this is where we have like stable energy levels, we're feeling good, we're not doing big spikes and crashes. But let's say you have a donut in the morning, right? So what happens is you spike that blood sugar, it goes up high, and then again, that your body, it triggers that insulin to come out. And this actually comes out from this organ, I don't know if you can see it, but right here called your pancreas. Your pancreas squeezes out those insulin trucks, they drive around, and then our blood sugar goes down because now it's in our cells, right? And when we spike too high, what goes up must come down, and then we can get a crash. So rather than staying in the sweet spot, our blood sugar goes high, insulin goes high, and now it crashes. And this is when we want to maybe reach for something like, a mid-morning cookie or, coffee and another donut, coffee and a bagel, something to get our blood sugar back up, right? And then we kind of get into this cycle of spiking and crashing. So ultimately, kind of in a nutshell, my approach with weight loss is to focus on that foundation of blood sugar and to really help keep the blood sugar nice and steady so we're not having these big spikes and crashes of insulin, which, as I mentioned, is telling our body to store fat rather than to burn it.
Definitely. So how did you find out, what did you find out actually? What is the best way to control your blood sugar level?
Yeah, well, the analogy that I like to make here is that when we are eating, we want to build a good, sturdy sort of campfire in our bodies. So here's what I mean by that. So you can think about your body like a furnace or like a campfire, right? And you can think about food as fuel or the logs for that campfire or the furnace. So there's 3 kinds of fuel that we can eat. And anytime we eat, we're eating one of these things: fats, protein, and carbohydrates. So fat, you can think of as one of those big logs. They're incredibly helpful at stabilizing blood sugar levels. They burn really steady and they burn really slow, and they give us a good, lasting, steady, stable campfire, right? Some examples of healthy fats are things like fish, like especially fatty fish, like salmon. Small oily fish are fantastic for us. So things like sardines, right? Also nuts and seeds are sources of nice healthy fats, and oils, of course. So things like olive oil or coconut oil, or oils from nuts and seeds like walnut oil, flax oil, things like that. So these are our steady, nice, big logs for our campfire. And we want to make sure we're feeding our body plenty of these to keep that campfire nice and stable. And then you can think of the medium-sized logs as protein. So, protein, things like beef, chicken, turkey, fish, right? Plant-based protein, things like lentils, chickpeas, things like this. And then lastly, we have our kindling, and this is our carbohydrates. So kindling, it burns really bright and then it burns out, right? So you can't build a strong, stable campfire with kindling alone. And so I like to use this campfire analogy because as we're creating our snacks, our meals, we want to make sure that we're not just using kindling as our source of fuel, because not only is that going to be problematic for our energy levels, right? Burning bright and then burning out, it's also going to be problematic for weight gain, because again, when it burns bright, our body's pumping out that insulin, and therefore it's telling us to store fat, store sugar, don't burn. So that is essentially what I help people do is build that healthy campfire and really focus on those good healthy fats as the foundation of the majority of the calories that we want to be consuming. Of course, fats are more calorically dense than either carbs or protein. So really making sure we're building our campfire in a good, balanced, even way.
Definitely. So, a keto diet. So it's high fat, low carbohydrates, right? Is that what you recommend your clients?
Yeah, so keto is definitely very incredibly effective at balancing and bringing down those insulin levels. I think that's one, definitely something that can be very effective. It is something that I work with clients around, that's not the only way to lose weight, but it is a very, very powerful way. It really is, it supercharges the balancing of those insulin levels. It really brings them down, and it really encourages our body to store or to melt fat rather than store it, right? But there are a couple of places where I see it going wrong for people. And it's definitely, it can be a very powerful diet, but there are a few places that I caution people to kind of keep an eye out, because I see it going wrong sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. And specifically, to kind of get into what some of those common mistakes are and where I see it kind of going off the rails is, one, going too fast too soon. So especially if somebody has been yo-yo dieting, oftentimes there was this, the diet dogma through the 90s, early 2000s, low fat was the craze, right? Everybody was telling you to eat low fat, cut your fat intake. We had low fat yogurts, we had low fat dairy products, low fat everything. It's like everything, yeah, right? Everything had the fat taken out. And so what happens when we are really reducing our fat consumption is, so when we eat fat, we have our liver and our gallbladder. So these are two organs of fat digestion that help break it down. So your liver produces something called bile, which gets stored in your gallbladder. And this breaks down the fat so that it's usable for your body. When we're not eating enough fat, we're not working that gallbladder as much. And so what can happen is that bile can start to get a little thick or sludgy, and it's not set up. It gets like out of shape, we could say, right? So if we've been doing a lot of low fat diets and then suddenly we hammer in all of these fats, it can cause gallbladder problems. And I've seen that in my practice and with other, practitioners and clinicians that I've worked with. That's something that we've seen is these gallbladder issues spiking because people trying keto without properly preparing their bodies first. So it's not to say that if you've ever done a low fat diet, you can't do keto. But what it does say is that if you have been doing low fat for a long time or have had a history of doing a lot of low fat diets, we really want to bring in gallbladder supportive foods, and we want to kind of ramp your body up so that you can move into keto in a way that's not going to be a big shock to your body. In a couple ways that you can help support gallbladder function. So the way that I like personally to work with my clients around keto is I do 2 phases. I do an intro phase, and then I do full keto. And I do that intro phase for a few weeks, depending on the client, depending on their need for support with digestion or gallbladder or whatever that might be, or blood sugar. We do a rebalancing phase in the beginning to really help them get set up for it. So we bring in things like beets. Beets are fantastic for healthy gallbladder function. They're really great at thinning that bile, creating a nice, healthy flow of bile. So that's one thing. And, if you're at all familiar with keto, beets aren't something you eat a ton of on the keto diet because they're higher in carbohydrate, but they're great for this intro phase when we're getting your body really well set up for it. So things like beets, also digestive bitters, which is something that isn't as common out here in the West, but becoming increasingly common as people are learning about the wonderful benefits they have for digestion and digestive health. So really kind of getting the body prepared so that you're not just throwing your body into a state of ketosis and you are, creating this big shock to the body. And I want to say too, just in case anybody's not familiar with what keto is exactly, right? We're bringing down those carbohydrates to such a low level that our body, I talked about a little earlier where glucose from sugar is the source of fuel we normally use. Well, when we're reducing that sugar consumption so low, what happens is our body switches to using fat for fuel rather than sugar for fuel. And ketones are a byproduct of fat, essentially. So rather than just relying on glucose, now our body's able to use ketones as a source of fuel. And as a result, it melts fat. It's a very effective way to lose weight, for sure.
Can you talk about that? It was very interesting, like that lean into the keto, that the process, that pre-period of keto. What else do you suggest to your clients, like so to kind of guide them directly to the keto and like not throw them in straight away? What kind of other like nutrients were they sort of meal plans maybe, or that how many times a day they have to eat, and whether it's a certain times in the day to eat? Can you talk about that a little bit more, please?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Happy to. So like I mentioned kind of in the beginning, those different foundations, right? So we have digestion, we have blood sugar, fats, minerals, hydration, all of these things. If there's a big imbalance in any one of them, it can create the transition into keto. It can make it harder. So in my preparatory phase, in my intro phase, I focus on all of these foundations, really. And so, because digestion, when we talk about liver and gallbladder health as being sometimes problematic with keto, that falls under the foundation of digestion, right? These are digestive organs, among other responsibilities that the liver has, over 400 functions, but digestion is one. So with that digestive pillar, so like I mentioned, bringing in specific gallbladder support, there is a supplement that I really like a lot. I use the supplement line Biotics. It's a professional line, but it's really a good one. There's a product called Beta TCP. And it is, it basically acts as like a super concentrated beet concentrate. It has other things in there too, but it's fantastic for liver health. Also things like beet kvass. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but this is a fermented beet beverage. Basically, it's kind of like a lot of us are familiar with kombucha, right? So it's kind of a similar kombucha counterpart, only rather than tea and sugar, which is what kombucha is made with. We have beet juice essentially when we create this wonderful fermented drink, and it has a double benefit here, not just of helping our liver and our gallbladder, but it also brings in wonderful probiotics and enzymes, and that's going to be really great for strengthening that digestive foundational pillar there. So that's a big one, is focusing on digestion. And when I'm working with clients, I take a look at how is their digestion, at the outset. So if they have more need for digestive support, we might focus a little bit more on that. But really for everybody, I do recommend bringing in liver, gallbladder supportive foods, digestive support through, again, those things like beets, bitters, and fermented vegetables. So not only beet kvass, but things like sauerkraut, kimchi, cortito. We have these various countries that have given us these wonderful types of different fermented vegetables. But a tip here that I want to share with your audience is that you don't want to just pick up a jar of sauerkraut that you might find on the shelf at your grocery store, non-refrigerated, because there's kind of two ways to create something like sauerkraut. You can either soak it in vinegar, essentially, which creates more of a culinary sauerkraut. That's just, it doesn't necessarily have nutritional benefit beyond the nutrients found in the cabbage, right? Mm-hmm. What we want is a true raw fermented food. It shouldn't have vinegar listed in the ingredients. And that's kind of the deciding factor that I help my clients look at. Okay, pick up that jar. If it's not refrigerated and it says vinegar, that's not going to be helping us with our digestive pillar like we want. We want that one that's basically cabbage, salt, and then the other spices that they've used for that, because that's really where we get our probiotics and enzymes. And that's going to be refrigerated generally. So, and ideally bringing in those fermented vegetables a few times a day. If you can do it at every meal, that would be ideal, truly. Some form of fermented product. So maybe that's a little bit of beet kvass with breakfast, right? Maybe it's some sauerkraut with lunch and dinner. However that might be, because this digestive pillar, this digestive foundation is usually pretty compromised in our modern culture. Digestion and blood sugar are the two big ones that I see people really needing more support with. And that's why we spend time in that ramp up phase doing that. So again, bitters, and if you just Google digestive bitters, you'll find a lot of great options. So digestive bitters, the good beets, and fermented vegetables are going to be a great way to start. You can also bring in apple cider vinegar. That's another wonderful digestive tool that you can begin to use. You can do just, a tablespoon of it in half a cup or a cup of water. If you do that 10 or so minutes before you eat, 10 to 15 minutes before you eat, that can be a really wonderful way to help prime your digestion for receiving your meal, for receiving that food. And if you have a tummy ache, apple cider vinegar is a really fantastic home remedy too. Yeah. So that's kind of the digestive piece that we bring in. And then for blood sugar in this ramp up phase, what we're doing is we want to start decreasing our carbs in a way that we can begin to encourage our body to understand it doesn't just need to rely on carbohydrates for fuel. Because in our, again, modern society, it's so sugar laden and it's so rich in carbohydrates that we have become, you can think of it as metabolically inflexible. So where it used to be, in a primal sense, ancestral sense, we used to be able to switch in and out of ketosis more easily because sometimes there just wasn't food around, right? Sometimes we would hunt or whatever, and there would be a lot of food at one point and not a lot of food at another point. So we would need to be able to switch in and out of ketosis. And there was this metabolic flexibility. But currently, we can, go across the street and get a dozen donuts whenever we want, right? And it's highly palatable, right? These foods are delicious. They send off these reward centers in our brain every time we eat them. So it's so easy to get addicted to these foods and to have them and want them all the time. Yeah. Right. So in that ramp up phase, what we're doing is we're starting to encourage a return of that metabolic flexibility by taking down these sugary foods, taking out the processed sugars, taking out the cakes and cookies and donuts, and in their place, bringing in a lot of nutrient dense foods, starting to bring in more fat. Not quite as much fat as we do once we're in ketosis, but creating a transitionary period where we're regaining some of that metabolic flexibility and really being able to prime our bodies and remind our bodies how to live off of things other than so much sugar and so much carbohydrate. So in a nutshell, that's sort of that introductory phase where we're getting your body prepared and ready for keto. Because as you might know, it's very common to have things like keto flu, or just feeling terrible
Yeah.
as you're transitioning right into ketosis. And if you are just going cold turkey and straight into keto, it can really be a shock for the body. And this is the time when a lot of people fall off keto and they're like, keto didn't work for me.
Yeah.
It was so hard, right? You might have heard this before. Like,
definitely. And it's not just that. I think, oh, my body didn't like it. But I think what the people don't understand that is the same thing, is that your body transitioning into it. So it's changing, and it's the same thing as when you stop smoking. It's hard in the beginning. You want it, but you have to get power through that. It's the same thing with, I think, with any diet, whether it's a keto or any other diet, because you changing all your nutrients, your body's changing what you were having before and what you're having all of a sudden. So
yeah,
you need to kind of to make a changes. So yeah, people, I think, misleading the messages that body sends it to him. They think, oh, my body doesn't like this, is no good for my body, so they will stop it before they actually let it go with it and see where you're gonna take them.
yeah,
I want
absolutely.
another thing. You were talking about gallbladder.
Mhm.
How about that people already have a problem with a gallbladder? What would you suggest to them?
Yeah. So if they already know that they have gallbladder issues, gallstones, a couple of ways to identify this as well is, if you have a high fat meal right now and you feel nauseous, that is a sign that your gallbladder needs support. That is indicative of either a sluggish, congested, or otherwise gallbladder that needs some TLC, right? Needs some love and support. So I would not suggest going into the keto diet with pre-existing gallbladder issues. I would very much recommend working with a practitioner so you can really support, and for your individual situation, support your gallbladder. Usually that looks like, might look like supplementation, might look like some modified dietary change for a little while, probably something not that dissimilar to the intro phase, kind of the intro ramp up thing I was talking about. But I really would strongly suggest working with a practitioner rather than diving right into keto if you have, if you know that you have gallbladder issues. Now, if you don't have a gallbladder, that's also a thing, right? And it doesn't mean that just because you don't have a gallbladder doesn't mean you can't do keto. Many people do keto very successfully without a gallbladder. All that means, the gallbladder is just the bag that holds the bile. So when you remove that sac, you remove that gallbladder bag, it doesn't mean you're not producing bile, because the liver is what produces the bile. It just puts it into the gallbladder. So the only way you wouldn't be producing bile is if you didn't have a liver anymore. And if you didn't have a liver, you wouldn't be alive, right? So the liver is what produces that bile, and then it puts it into the sac. And then when the body has fat come in, the gallbladder squeezes and puts the right amount of bile into the body, right into your intestine, basically. So if we no longer have a gallbladder, what I definitely recommend and suggest is you do have liver and gallbladder supportive foods when you're eating. So like that supplement I mentioned earlier, beta TCP, this would be something personally for me, if I didn't have a gallbladder and I was trying to do keto, I would definitely be having a liver support supplement every time I ate a meal, because basically I'm helping introduce supplements to support and replace the function that the gallbladder used to be doing for me, used to be able to help me with. So yeah, maybe long answer to your question, but there is some special consideration for gallbladder issues with keto.
Jessica, tell us what is the most common mistake people make when they're trying to lose weight?
Yeah, so I think that definitely a couple of things that I see. One is trying to rely on willpower. And this kind of breaks my heart, because I see this a lot, right? Where people beat themselves up. They think that, I just don't have willpower. I just don't have enough self-discipline. I can't, I try to do it and I can't. And then they beat themselves up about it. And the thing is, willpower has less to do with it than hormones have to do with it, right? So we talked about like that insulin. If your insulin is all over the map and it's up and down, when your insulin goes low down here, if it goes to your blood sugar, right? If your blood sugar goes too low, then you die, right? So your body, if you're crashed down here in low blood sugar land, your body is sending off alarms, right? It's like, whoa, danger, 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 danger. And for you, you're kind of fighting up against your body's primal survival mechanisms. If you have dipped into low blood sugar, it's not about willpower. Your body will override you. And if you feel like you've been on a diet before and you're like, my body is like actually overriding what I'm trying to do, it's like you're butting up against those primal survival mechanisms. It's not your fault. You need to get those hormones dialed in, right? You need to dial in those hormones. And the way we do that, wonderfully, food, every time we take a bite of food, we're able to influence our hormones, right? And so if we can start to bring down those carbohydrates and crowd them out with healthier options, and I'm a big fan of crowding out rather than cutting out, rather than saying, I have to cut out these cookies that I eat every day. We say, let's crowd out those cookies. What can we bring in their place that's really satisfying and delicious? If you're at all familiar with keto, those in the audience, you might have heard things called like fat bombs, where you have like balls or things that are made of nuts and seeds and nut butter and maybe some collagen protein and things like that. Well, maybe start digging into some recipes of yummy, healthy fat bombs. And you might find if you eat a fat bomb before you eat the cookie, maybe you find that you don't even necessarily want the cookie anymore, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's a big one, is that willpower piece. Don't even think about willpower as being part of the equation. Think about, how can I support my body and bring in the nutrients that it needs and that it wants, so that you can work with your body rather than against it. When it's like a fight of willpower, it's like you wanting to be thin against your body wanting to live, right? And your body's going to win. So we need to, rather than working against it, understand that your body, all it wants is for you to survive and to live and to be in a state of balance. So moving into and working with the flow of your body is the best way to do that. And that's really what my sort of practice and paradigm is all about, is using nutrient dense foods to nourish and support and restore balance in the body, rather than feeling like you need to deprive yourself, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I think a lot of people, like, when they decided to go on a diet, to start a journey, and that's all it is on their mind, is just that the diet, how to lose weight, how to eat less, possibility that kind of comes in. And that's what they think all the time. And where I'm trying to say, you just fine, you decided to go on a diet, but just have your breakfast or whatever you eat. Just get on with your day, with your life. Don't think constantly, because you depriving yourself, and all is on your mind is the food. So the more you think it, the more you want it. And it's just like, well, you before you started diet, you wasn't thinking that way, because they go on a diet, the mind is changing, and that's all they think constantly. And I was like, just to have a breakfast, have a lunch, and get on with your day. Do things that you always do, and don't make it complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thing I'll say on that too, if you are constantly thinking about food, that is an indication that there's not enough nourishment happening, right? Your body does need those nutrients to survive and survive well. When you are truly nourished, when you really have brought in those healthy fats, good protein, the right amount of carbs for your body, whatever that might mean at the time in that stage of your life and what you're trying to accomplish, you stop thinking about food so much. It's really kind of incredible. I've had clients tell me, like, there's no way you can ever get me to stop craving sugar, because it has been a situation for me my whole life. I've had many clients tell me this, right? Like, there is no way you're going to be able to get me to stop craving sugar, or stop thinking about those cookies, or stop thinking about that ice cream.
Yeah,
And it's like, okay, right. And it's like, okay, well, let's just see. Let's go, come on this journey with me. Let's just see. And it's really incredible when you really start to nourish your body, when you give it the nutrients that it needs, things come into balance, and
yeah,
you actually you don't want those foods anymore. It's more like, okay, you can take it or you can leave it. It's not that ice cream isn't still delicious,
yeah.
but you don't have to think about it all. Your body's not telling you to think about it all the time, because it's satisfied. It's actually satiated
Yeah.
through the nutrient dense foods that you're eating.
Definitely, because I'm the same. I have sweet tooth, and I thought in my life that, like, there is no way I will be able live without sugar. And where I used to take 3 teaspoons of sugar in my coffee, and that's a lot. And whereas now I don't take none, like I have no sugar whatsoever. And when I cut out the sugar from my diet, my senses, my sugar basically senses kind of reset it. And the taste of the sugar is so powerful now. If I have a little bit somewhere, or I can taste sugar in the things, in the food that I haven't been able to taste before. And it's just completely resets you. And it's really, really powerful thing.
Mm-hmm. It's so true.
Yeah, and you start looking at it from completely different level. Like when people starting with like quite like high negativity, and when they going in that journey, going like through it, and then halfway when they start and get into it, it's like, yes, actually that's not too bad. I don't crave sugar. I don't need, like, same as the fat bombs, they're not that so sweet. You can make them, but they are delicious. And when you have them and you think like, oh my god, I'm so full, I don't want all the flavors, whatever is satisfying. I don't crave sugar. I don't crave anything. I'm completely full. I'm fine. And there's the thing is, like, before you start craving like on something like junk food, let's just say, just have something healthy, and it will reset. And you won't be able, you no longer crave for that junk food. If you were craving, as you said, you're craving for the donuts, if you had a fat bomb, you want donuts after all, because that's it. You satisfy these the nutrients, all you had it, whatever the fats and the sugar levels and everything, it's just there. So yeah, it's very powerful. It's amazing.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And there was one other thing actually too I wanted to mention when you said, when you're asking about mistakes people were making in losing weight, because this also ties into keto that I see too. It's a mistake in both areas that I see. And that is foods that cause inflammation. So eating foods that can be inflammatory to our bodies. Now, this can actually be different for different people. For example, with a lot of clients that I work with, dairy can be inflammatory. And so what happens that is problematic here with the inflammation situation is that when we eat foods that are causing inflammation, it interferes with another hormone that's called leptin. And this is our I feel full hormone. So the inflammation causes this disruption with our I feel full hormone, leptin, and this creates a cascade of not feeling satisfied or wanting to eat more, whatever that might be. Inflammation also does a lot of other things that we don't want, but specifically in regards to weight, this is problematic. And that's why with keto, that's another trouble spot that I see are people eating things like, processed keto treats, like highly processed protein powders, things that are, that are creating inflammation in the body. Low quality oils, like that's a huge one for inflammation. That's a huge one. Low quality, like the vegetable oil that you see sitting on the shelf, the bright yellow vegetable oil, that is inflammatory. That is inflammatory to our bodies, and we don't want to consume that. So that's a big one. When we can bring in things that cool and soothe the inflammation, such as an abundance of really high quality, healthy fats, and also detoxifying and anti-inflammatory vegetable foods, right? That's a big issue on keto that I see a lot, is people not eating enough vegetables. And they think that it's a bacon, cheese, and butter diet, but
Yep.
that is a way to do keto, but that's definitely not the way that I recommend keto be done. Not that you can't ever have some, high quality bacon every now and then, but I don't want bacon being the cornerstone of your keto diet. I'm really an advocate of a clean keto diet. And this is what I teach: clean keto for women. And bringing in, the good, right kinds of healthy fats, and the cornerstone being low carbohydrate vegetables. So we're still getting the minerals, right? We talked about minerals as one of those foundations. Key for keto, you need to replenish your minerals because you lose a lot in the keto diet. So and one way to replenish them is through lots of good veggies. And so that's a big one. That's just something I wanted to make sure I mentioned too, because that's where I see not only keto diet going wrong, but regular diets going wrong too, is identifying foods that are inflammatory and those that cool and soothe inflammation, and really making sure that we're focusing on those.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really wonderful talking to you. Before we're gonna go, is there anything else on your mind that you would like to share with our audience?
Well, I guess the only other thing is, if anybody is interested in this sort of two-phase keto approach, or interested in the clean version of keto, they are certainly welcome to visit my site, eatcleanwithjessica.com. And if you go to eatcleanwithjessica.com/keto, I actually have a free 5-day video series that walks you through kind of these things that I'm talking about and helps you to implement some of these concepts. So I would love anybody who's interested in that to come check that out. It's totally free.
Thank you so much. Well,
yeah.
Thank you for watching, to our audience, and have a good day. Bye.